We previously discussed how part of Disney's live-action Mulan was filmed in Xinjiang. That's an autonomous territory in northwest China where the Chinese Communist Party has been ethnically cleansing Uyghur people. And because Britain has formally declared a genocide is happening against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang, the country took issue with Disney filming in that region.
So Disney responded in a letter to the Parliament of the UK saying that Chinese regulations require Disney to partner with the Chinese production company, adding, quote, "The decision to film in each one of these locations was made by the film's producer in the interest of authenticity, and it was in no way dictated by influence or state or local Chinese officials." And now co-founder of Inquire and More, journalist Zaid Jilani joins us now to discuss. Zaid, what's going on here with relation to Disney? They're kind of basically just brushing this all away. What's happening?
Yeah, so Disney obviously had a big budget release last year with the release of a live-action adaptation of Mulan, which was their cartoon from the 1990s. It was discovered shortly after the film was released that if you look at the very end in the credits, you'll see that they actually thanked the local Chinese government and police bureau within Xinjiang because it turned out they actually filmed there for part of the film. Now, the majority of the film was filmed in New Zealand, but they did film, I think, in around 20 locations in China just for authenticity. The film was supposed to be set in China, even though it's mostly filmed in New Zealand. So what happened was, some folks in the UK government and the parliament were upset about this. They're saying, this was a region where ethnic cleansing is occurring. The United States has now accused China of genocide in that region. And so they asked Disney basically to explain themselves, why were you there? And as you explained in the opening segment, Disney basically said that when foreign firms, I mean, in this case, it's an American firm, but in foreign firms, when they locate in China and they film in China, they're required to partner with local Chinese entities, including businesses that are, tend to be tied to the government or have some connection with the government. And so it wasn't really their decision to film there, is basically what they're saying. Obviously, it was their decision to use the footage, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure they were aware of what was happening. And if I was in the Commons Business Select Committee, which was the body within the Parliament that asked Disney for to explain itself, I would ask for more documentation in terms of the communications they had about this. I mean, what was their response when they discovered that this was happening? I mean, they certainly were under no obligation to use the footage, even if they didn't choose the location. And I think what happened, part of what's happening here is I think Disney is seeing what happened to other companies when they kind of step out of line. I mean, yes. A good example was earlier this year, H&M, which I think is I think it's based in Sweden or in Europe. Yeah. They had made some sort of statement that they were concerned about what was happening in Xinjiang and that they don't source their products there. And the reaction in China was swift. I mean, they faced boycotts from private individuals. They were kicked off of several Chinese social media platforms and services. I mean, they were kind of made an example of, right? And I think similarly, we saw that with the NBA. A single general manager of a team, I think, gave a tweet about Hong Kong, right? And the entire relationship was imperiled for several weeks, whereas, China was talking about potentially not partnering with the NBA anymore. So I think that Disney understands that if they're going to continue to maintain a relationship with, a couple billion consumers in China at this point, or we're talking about that, that they're going to have to toe the line. And I think that's what really explains why once they figured, even if they didn't intentionally film in this location, even if it was something that was done through contractors who were Chinese, as soon as they figured out what happened, they didn't make any effort to cut that from the film or to be apologetic in any way about doing it. Right. I think they just, they sort of saw themselves having the total line. So
yeah, Well, I mean, look, Disney, multinational corporation, they care about one thing, and that's the bottom line. And so what you're describing here is an asymmetrical situation where if you do something that the Chinese government doesn't like, you're going to face massive consequences. Whereas, their actions here, they've faced some backlash. Has it impacted, what their profit margin on this movie was? No, not whatsoever. So that's the calculus that they're making.
Yeah, I think you're right. Asymmetrical is the right word here because, people talk about operating in China as if it's same as operating anyone else. You're investing in a certain territory, you have local partners, you have consumers, so on and so forth. But China operates differently because even private businesses in China tend to be tied to the government, tend to have oversight from the government. And the government will move very swiftly against you if they see you as a firm that's undermining their foreign policy or their reputation or their image. And I think that this weighs heavily on the minds of firms that are doing business in China. And I don't think that they'll face the same pressure here in the United States. We've almost become accustomed to producing a massive amount of goods in China. And I think you see this particularly throughout Hollywood. They're increasingly looking at their customer base as a foreign customer base. They want to be in that Chinese market. And I don't think that they necessarily see themselves as purely American companies. They're multinational companies with multinational audiences. And I think that this is going to pose a real question for democracies in the world right now, I think, because increasingly companies that are supposedly or theoretically based in their countries will be wanting to do business essentially with the Chinese government. Even if they say it's not with the Chinese government, say it's with the Chinese market, they're going to have to end up interacting with the Chinese government because of how thoroughly saturated it is throughout all the affairs of businesses in China, and particularly foreign investment, foreign capital. So I think this is it's like Crystal said, it's an asymmetrical situation where costs are really not imposed on our companies when doing business in China, but they will be imposed very heavily from the Chinese government should they be seen as being untoward or unpatriotic towards what the Chinese image is trying to present at this moment. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, Zaid. Appreciate it, man.
Great to see you, Zaid.
Thank you. Bye.
Coming up, Jeremy Scahill is going to break down President Biden's consistently inconsistent stance on war and foreign policy. Those are his words over the last 50 years when Rising returns.